So in the near future, I'd like to start talking about the philosophical implications of hell. This'll be fun. But before I do that, there are a few things that we need to get out of the way first, one of which is the Euthyphro Dilemma. The Euthyphro Dilemma is a classic question directed towards Christians, religious people, who claim that God is the source of morality, and it aims to show that God cannot be the source of morality. The Euthyphro Dilemma goes like this. Is something good because God commands it, or does God command something because it's good? If something is good simply because God commands it, well then anything could be considered good. In fact, to say that something is good means nothing more than, well, God commands it. However, if God commands something because it's good, well then God really isn't the source of morality. He's just the messenger. Something else is the source of morality. Something else is establishing what is good and what is not good. Now I'd love to go on and elaborate in further detail, but the user SisyphusRedeemed has beat me to it. He's already got a fantastic video that explains the Euthyphro Dilemma and really just how intractable the problem is given any solution, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
So, Epidemic 2020 and Schwa-Nerd have been going back and forth over the issue of God and objective morality. It's been an interesting exchange, and if you want to check it out, I'll put a link below. Schwa-Nerd hit Epidemic with the standard Euthyphro Dilemma. Here's Epidemic's curt but apt summary of the problem, and his response to it.
The Euthyphro Dilemma is an attack on premise 1. It seeks to show that God cannot be the foundation of morality, and obviously I don't think it succeeds. So here's the Euthyphro Dilemma. Is that which is good commanded by God because it is good, or is it good because God commands it? Another way of thinking about this would be to ask the question, is the standard of morality something external to God, or something He created? Now the first option shows us that if God commanded something because it's good, then He is appealing to a higher standard. That would make the standard of morality external to Him, so He can't be the standard. The second option makes morality subject to God's arbitrary commands. That would make morality subjective, so once again, God would not be the standard of objective morality. The answer to this dilemma is neither. The standard of morality is not external to God, nor is it something that He arbitrarily creates. Rather, God's nature, aka His essential properties, is the standard. It's not something He creates or appeals to, it's something He is. Now, as you may notice, there is nothing arbitrary or subjective about that possible answer. Now, as long as that option is even possible, then the Euthyphro Dilemma has 3 possible answers. And a dilemma with 3 alternatives is a false dilemma.
Now, I'm all in favor of splitting the horns of a dilemma. Too often we fail to recognize that there are more than just 2 options available to us, and that leads us to reason poorly. That having been said, Epidemic doesn't seem to realize that if all 3 horns of a trilemma are equally unacceptable, then a trilemma can be just as vexing as a dilemma. But I do think Epidemic's third option here is, at least, a creative attempt to try to get around the problem. Here's how I put the point in my philosophy of religion class. I hope it's faithful enough to your original line of thinking, Epidemic. Think about a yardstick. A yardstick doesn't decide how long a yard is, but nor does it recognize how long a yard is. Rather, a yardstick just is a yard. It's the very standard of the thing in question. The nature of a yardstick is what determines a yard, not its will nor its judgment. So what exactly is the problem with Epidemic's third option? In short, it's not actually a third option at all. The same basic Euthyphro problem arises again, just in different terms. Does God have control over His nature, or does God's nature have control over Him? Could God alter His nature if He chose to, or is His nature unalterable? If we choose the first option, then we're right back where we started. God decides His nature, and in so doing, He's deciding what is good and what is not, making morality subjective, based solely on the caprice of how God decides to choose His nature. And if we choose the second option, that God has no control over His nature, well, this poses certain problems for the claim that God's omnipotent, but let's set that aside. If we choose this option, then something other than God is actually dictating what God's nature is. Ultimately, then, it is this external force that is the true ground of morality, not God. This is the case, of course, for the yardstick. It's the weights and measures people that dictate how long a yard is, not the yardstick itself. So, in short, we can't avoid the basic Euthyphro problem by simply appealing to God's nature. In fact, I'd take it one step further and say any attempt to split Euthyphro's horns will simply collapse back into the same dilemma. Because for any X that's supposed to be an alternative to either God's will or God's judgment, such as, say, his nature, we would perforce be compelled to ask the question whether God is in control of that X, or whether God was not in control of that X. One could, of course, try to split the horns of this dilemma as well by appealing to some Y, but the futility of this move should be evident before I even say the words infinite regress. At the end of the day, the Euthyphro problem is more than just a riddle or a test of one's faith. It's an intractable and insoluble problem that completely vitiates the central doctrine of nearly every monotheistic religion on the planet. No one has ever given a satisfactory response to it in over 2,300 years of desperate attempts to do so. Divine command theory was dead long before Christian apologists ever tried giving birth to it. A stillborn monstrosity that they have hoisted by its putrefying umbilical cord and animated like a cadaverous marionette for the last 2 millennia. Let's please have the decency to bury this emaciated corpse of an argument, say a brief elegy, and if we must, mourn the passage of yet another simplistic solution to a major existential problem. But even if the apologists insist on continuing to parade this necrotic argument around like the world's longest-running snuff film in the hopes that someday it might be brought back to life like their misbegotten savior, they at least have to realize that it shan't be resurrected by appealing to something as tawdry as the charge of a false dilemma. Frankly, you'd have much better luck clapping your hands saying, "I do believe in Jesus. I do! I do!"